Wild animals never kill for entertainment. Only humans, the only creatures to whom the agonies and deaths of their brethren bring joy. James and Tana Fruit knows, in nature I am a realist. I believe only what I see. So when they tell me tales about non-existent demons and ghosts, it pisses me off and makes me laugh at the same time. Remember this, all your mysticism is utter nonsense. Humans, that's who you should truly fear. People are unpredictable creatures, and sometimes they do things that will make your blood run cold. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. This story happened to me a long time ago, back in the early 2000s, after the Second Chechen War. I couldn't find myself for several months, wandering around the city like a vagabond, watching how people lived, feeling stagnant, until one glorious day when I got a job as a truck driver. Despite the heavy schedule and sleepless nights, I almost immediately fell in love with my new profession. I loved roaming the vast expanses of our country behind the wheel. There was something special about it. Every time I was pulled to the road like a magnet, I happily continued transporting various goods, until one fateful day, something terrible happened. I remember it like it was yesterday, October 21st, early in the morning. I received an unexpected order from my boss to drive a loaded truck to another city, not far away, in the neighboring region. Since there were no other trips planned for me that week, and you could never have too much money, I gladly accepted the route and started preparing for the trip. I left the city on the same day, around 1 p.m., and by 2 p.m., I was cruising down Route 404, the only major road in the area that I had traveled on many times before. I had never witnessed any major incidents on this road, or at least none that I was aware of. As I was driving and enjoying the surrounding views, I suddenly noticed a man standing on the side of the road, actively trying to hitch a ride from passing drivers. Immediately I noticed a few odd things. First, there were no other cars or strangers around, which could only mean two things. Either the man was hitchhiking for some reason, or he had come out of the woods and was now looking for a ride to the nearest town. Second, the man looked unkempt and wild, almost unrecognizable, with his thick beard and long dirty hair covering his face. His clothing seemed very old and worn out. Of course, at that moment, I didn't pay attention to it at all. The stranger, with the hoarse voice, his eyes as gray as ashes, told me his tale of woe. His beloved car, his Swallow, was stuck in a ditch in the nearby woods. I couldn't ignore his plea for help, so we set off together towards the abandoned village where he claimed his relatives lived. As we walked, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease about this mysterious encounter. Once we arrived at the scene, I saw the old yellow Zaporojets tilting precariously in the muddy pit. I tried to come up with a plan to get it out, but our initial efforts failed. The car was firmly lodged in the muck, refusing to budge an inch. After a moment of rest, I sat down by the ditch, pondering our next move. It was clear that brute force alone wouldn't solve this problem. My mind raced with thoughts of different strategies, but nothing seemed quite adequate for the situation at hand. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, I realized that we needed a miracle to get the Swallow out of its muddy prison. And so I sat there in the fading light, pondering our next move in the quiet stillness of the abandoned village. A small tunnel was needed for the wheel that was too tightly stuck, and a piece of wood wouldn't hurt either. It could be placed here. And the deal that I wanted to make, unfortunately, went unfulfilled. As a powerful blow suddenly hit me in the back of the head, my vision darkened, and my mind immediately plunged into a bottomless pit. When I came to, I found myself in a dim room with no windows or even a tiny crack for light to seep through. The prevailing silence was occasionally interrupted by loud thuds coming from above, as if someone was actively chopping something with a huge cleaver. My poor head was buzzing, as if after a good drinking session, but that didn't stop me from collecting my thoughts and remembering everything that had happened to me the night before. Suddenly, the room I had been in this whole time was filled with the clanging of chains, which made me flinch and turn my gaze towards the source of the unpleasant sound. In the murky darkness, I noticed something gray and alive sitting on a chain in the far corner of the room. At one point, a wild fear washed over me, and I was about to bolt as far away from this place as possible when I felt a large metal ring around my neck, holding me captive like a desperate dog. My nerves couldn't take it, and I frantically pulled on the chain, trying to break free from this unlawful captivity. But all my attempts were in vain. The chains were securely nailed to the wall, leaving me with no chance of escape. Numerous failed attempts to break the cursed collar, I finally gave up and slumped back on the cold floor, contemplating what to do next. In the darkness, time dragged on, with an endless succession of nightmares and expectations. Occasionally, I caught different sounds from above, indicating that I was most likely in the basement of a very old house inhabited by a family of savages. In an instant, my attention was once again drawn to the familiar sound of chains clinking, reminding me that I was not the only prisoner in this madhouse. "Hey, can you hear me, buddy? You've been kidnapped too," I said, slightly encouraged. There was silence in response, and a faint snore, as if someone was sleeping and couldn't hear my questions. Gathering courage, I spoke a little louder. "Wake up! It's not time to sleep right now." The goosebumps that ran down my spine at the sound of my own voice added to the unknown horror I could only imagine had occurred during my absence. After the noise we made from above, voices were heard and footsteps approached the basement door. "Hey, I'll help you. Just don't make any noise and don't bother me, okay? Everything stays quiet." As soon as I finished speaking, the wooden door creaked open and bright light from a kerosene lamp flooded the dark basement room. A little piglet was being led to slaughter. It fell, and then the saw came down slowly, chopping it up. As the savage descended the stairs, he sang triumphantly. Judging by his voice, he was still quite. "Please ask another question so I can continue the story." I was young and inexperienced, which later became my main advantage. As soon as the barbarian descended into the basement, I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. He stopped for a moment and shone a flashlight in my eyes, then went to the opposite corner where my unfortunate comrade was. "Well, hello, little piggy. Admit it, you missed me, but you pretend to be asleep. I understand. No matter. We'll wake you up soon. Don't you dare scream, pig, you hear me? Don't you dare. Mama doesn't like when food screams." The savage hissed menacingly. When the captive slightly opened his eyes, I saw what made my hair stand on end. A man, bound in chains, in the corner, completely exhausted. His arms and legs were missing, his body covered with numerous knife wounds. It was a miracle that he managed to survive with such injuries. I also noticed the little monster who stood back to me, holding a long stick. Visually, he looked like an ordinary teenager, but he was a true monster at heart and deserved no mercy. All right, live for now. And who do we have here? Playing with the martyr now. The savage seemed to have shifted his focus to me, unknowingly heading towards his own grim fate. As he approached me, I suddenly opened my eyes and tripped him, causing him to clumsily fall to the floor and drop his sadistic weapon. All that remained was to silence the scoundrel without making too much noise. Luckily, no one heard the dying convulsions of their offspring upstairs, and I quickly freed myself from the iron chains. The battered young man held up well, his eyes burning with fire, as he gazed at the body of his tormentor with intense satisfaction. "Hey, buddy, what the hell happened to you?" I said, approaching the poor soul and examining his injuries closely. After a moment, I realized why the guy spoke with such a strange voice. His tongue had been cut out, most likely as punishment for screaming and trying to negotiate with his captors. "Just stay here and don't go anywhere. I'll be back for you, I promise," I said as I picked up a spear from the floor and made my way up the stairs. Quietly opening the creaky wooden door, I found myself in a small corridor lined with kerosene lamps and photographs of various people, clearly victims of these deranged psychopaths. And at that moment, as I was about to leave the basement and move to the adjacent room, a small axe suddenly flew out from the side and lodged itself in the door just 5 centimeters away from my face. I quickly turned around and saw an old woman rushing towards me, screaming and holding a bloodied kitchen cleaver. She was ready to strike with all her might. Reacting swiftly, I raised my spear forward and waited for the right moment. As the deranged woman approached, I thrust the tip of the spear directly into her throat. With a choking gasp, she collapsed to the floor in agony. I expected the mastermind behind this attack to come after me next, but to my surprise, the house fell silent. The only sound was the dying woman's gurgling. I decided to investigate further, searching for the head of the household. When I entered the kitchen, I was horrified by the scene before me. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all smeared with blood. On the table lay a dismembered body, with its head and organs neatly arranged in containers. Another severed head and numerous jars of preserved meat were in the open fridge. These monsters lured and killed people in the most brutal ways imaginable. As I contemplated the horror before me, footsteps approached from outside, accompanied by a chilling whistle of an unfamiliar melody. Grabbing a knife from the table, I prepared to defend myself. Soon, a happy and unsuspecting man named Andy entered the house, pretending to be a tired husband returning from work. As he approached the body, he noticed my actions and screamed in shock. Seizing the opportunity, I sneaked up behind him and prepared to attack. But before I could strike, Andy turned around and punched me in the face with surprising force. Although I staggered, I managed to stand my ground and engage in a fierce struggle with the enraged madman. The following minutes were a blur of intense combat as we fought like lifelong enemies. It was a battle for survival, and I was determined to emerge victorious. Somehow I managed to throw Andy down into the basement. He fell head over heels and lost consciousness right away, catching his breath. When he came to, I noticed a faint smoke in the house. Looking down the hallway, I saw the reason for the fire. In a fit of anger, one of us accidentally knocked over a kerosene lamp hanging on the wall, which shattered on the floor. Time was running out, so I gathered all my remaining strength and bolted to the basement where my friend was still trapped. It only took a few seconds to free him from the chains. Then I picked him up and swiftly ran out of the burning house. Good always triumphs over evil, and my story is a bright example of that. The lovers of humanity, along with their hideout, were burned to the ground and sent to hell. But Arson and I not only survived, but possibly saved dozens, if not hundreds, of lives. I found our truck in a clearing, not far from the abandoned village where the cannibals' house once stood. There were many other abandoned vehicles there, whose owners seemed to have also fallen for a clever trap set by the gray-eyed maniac. That night, I took Arson to the hospital and then calmly drove to the police station, where I recounted all the horrifying details of the day. With my help, the authorities were able to solve at least a couple dozen murders and uncover the main reason for the mysterious disappearances of people on that stretch of the highway.